What's up, YouTube? It's Rico here, CEO of SourceFind Asia, co-host of the Mainland China podcast, and the host of the SourceFind Asia YouTube channel. Back with another one. Still in Hong Kong. I had a fantastic day, lots of interviews, and I saved the best for last. Nick Zieber. How you doing?
I'm good. So, as Rico just said, I'm Nick Zieber. I'm the Chief Product Officer for AC Accelerate, and here to talk about some Hong Kong things and whatever.
Program
I'll let you lead
the
discussion.
community. Yeah. So in this video, Nick Zieber is going to be talking about what brought him to Hong Kong in the first place, and then of course the EnterChina program. I talk about it all the time, so I figured it would be good to make an actual video about my experiences and also what they're doing right now with the program. Start at the beginning, man. We talked about this yesterday.
Yeah.
What brought you to Hong Kong? What brought you to Asia? You went to China first, right?
Okay, so actually, when I was in high school, I got a scholarship to go to Japan, actually. So when I was like 17 years old, I was an exchange student in a local high school in Fukuoka, in Kyushu, in Japan. And from that point on, I kind of thought that I would just continue studying Japanese and, probably consider working in Japan. But, I went back and forth and did an internship later, like in Tokyo in, I think, 2006. And I started to get curious about what else was out there, and ended up, there was a program at my university, or like I saw this poster for a program, and it was called Semester at Sea. So Semester at Sea basically said, okay, we have a study abroad program where you get on a ship with like 600 other students, and you can visit, I think it was like 13 countries or something like that.
That sounds so awesome.
So we all met as a group in Ensenada, Mexico, like started in San Diego but took a bus down, and then started on a cruise ship kind of thing for study abroad. They're still going today, but it brought me to Hong Kong for the first time. And I had already had relatives living in Hong Kong. My aunt and uncle were here for a very long time, and my cousin and her husband were here. So I came here for like just 2 days, I think, and it really just changed my perspective, because it's just this cosmopolitan place, and a lot of people speak English here. And for people who've never been to Hong Kong, it's just a very it's a dynamic, fast-moving place that's very, very different than the way Japan is, but it's also got a lot of the same, I guess, flavor that you would have in a lot of other Asian countries. And so it's very much, like I said, this cosmopolitan place that I felt like I could be myself and, potentially see a longer-term future here.
Yeah.
Whereas Japan, I always felt a bit like an outsider there. So when I came to Hong Kong, it was just like, oh, it kind of clicked. And I guess the summer of 2008, I asked if I could do an internship here with my cousin's husband. And so I was here for 3 months, and I still really, really liked it. So then when I graduated from college in 2009, I came back. And I had no real plan. I just kind of came here and tried to figure it out. So.
And your family has a history of living abroad and stuff. And you mentioned that your grandparents were missionaries.
Yeah, my grandparents were missionaries in China in 1947, and in 1949 they were asked to leave due to certain political circumstances. But then, my aunt and uncle they moved to Taiwan at some point, so they were in Taiwan a long time, and ended up staying in Hong Kong for 27 years, something like that. Mm-hmm. I'd always grown up with Hong Kong on the radar. My mom would be talking to my aunt on the phone with a calling card, dialing up, and and the time difference. So I grew up
calling cards.
I grew up with that from a young age, and so I think in those 2 days, it was September 2007, it was only 2 days, but everything kind of shifted.
Yeah.
And I remember telling the person, I was with somebody and I was like, I'm moving, like I'm moving back here. And I've been pretty dead set on that goal. Basically, like the first time I tried, I came here with no plan, and finally got, offered a working visa and everything, and the visa got rejected. So I had to go back to the US for a year.
This was in 2009, 2010?
Yeah, that was in 2010.
Yeah.
But it wasn't my first try. There was like all this post-financial crisis stuff happening. So it wasn't a great time for anybody applying for jobs, but I figured that at least if I was going to be applying for jobs and getting rejected, I would rather do it in Hong Kong than in the US at that time.
Yeah.
There was like a lot of hiring freezes. But yeah, like it was a very wild time and like trying to figure out how to get rooted. And I was in the US for a year and I realized like maybe this is the chance where I finally go to China, learn some Chinese. And that's why I opted. A friend of mine was like, hey, if you come to Shenzhen, I can help get you a job. And so I was there for almost 2 years in Shenzhen before successfully getting a job and a working visa here. So finally did it and have been here about 6 years since that time.
And how did you meet your wife?
So yeah, she was actually working for a factory there, and we basically just met through friend of friends while we were in Shenzhen. And so as I made the transition in Hong Kong, basically every weekend, we would switch. So every other weekend we would go back and forth across the border. So I was between Hong Kong and Shenzhen for like 6 years. Like we're obviously still back and forth, but just not on the same time frame because we would only do on the weekend.
Yeah. What you did was you ended up leveraging being in China, like being in Shenzhen, being able to cross over to Hong Kong frequently to get your job in Hong Kong.
Yeah, and it was cool. I think part of, I have a distinct memory of hanging out in Shenzhen during the World Cup, 2010. And one of my really good friends, he kind of showed it to me for the first time. Like I got to stay probably a week and just, watch the matches on TV and really understand that Shenzhen is just this up and coming city. Like I don't think, it doesn't happen very often in history where you see all these things just happening year after year. So I knew that I wanted to be there to take part and see what was going on, how it was growing, and also at the same time, really learn Chinese because, if you don't know any Chinese, even being in Hong Kong, it's just a lot less valuable because you don't understand the context of things. You don't, if you don't have any knowledge of what's going on in mainland China, a lot of business happening in Hong Kong has to do with China. So this was also a good opportunity to just be there, and learn. And at the time, I definitely wasn't ready for it, and it felt like a roadblock. But looking back, I think that it was definitely the right thing. And Shenzhen is still this incredibly dynamic city that's growing, and so having experience in Hong Kong and there, like really, I feel like it's really valuable.
Yeah, and that's a really good point that you bring up because that's also feeding into what you're doing right now with EnterChina. So when you first started working in Hong Kong, how did the work that you do in Hong Kong lead you to meet the guys from Brink and Nick Ramil?
Okay, good question. So my first job was with a Japanese company. So it was a Japanese headhunting agency. And I even got to do one of my interviews in Japanese, which was cool. Glad I got the job.
Are you still fluent?
Yeah, it depends who's asking. But I think getting a job as a headhunter really, you learn how to do sales, you learn how to be on the phone. It's Hong Kong working style, so you're just kind of on call all the time.
Yeah.
So I did that, and the more I learned to kind of specialize in. You can't be a headhunter for everything, right? Like you can't recruit for like lawyers and banking and technology. Like you really need to specialize, and the more you understand how to specialize in an area, then kind of the better you can get at it, right? Because if you're searching for software developers, then you've got to even specialize in what kind of developers and what kind of programming languages they use. The more you can really specialize, the higher chance I think you have of success. So my next job was actually with an Australian based headhunting company, and it was there, got to work with a lot of really talented people and learn how to specialize. And so I kind of tried to become the person who was the headhunter for startups, right? Like there wasn't really a designated startup headhunter or company that was really specializing in startups because there wasn't a huge funding environment for early stage ventures in Hong Kong. I think it's changed over the last few years, but at that time, 2014, 15, it was just starting to get up and running.
And that's just because the startup costs in Hong Kong are so high, right?
It's really expensive to rent an office, and you don't have a ton of graduates from, so basically like all the tech graduates, they're forming in Shenzhen. Shenzhen has created this sort of cluster for technology. Hong Kong is still very much financial center.
Yeah.
So, in the meantime, you've seen fintech like rise and a lot of people working with crypto and blockchain and that type of technology has really taken off in Hong Kong due to experience in financial stuff, but there was not really a startup scene, as you would say. And so I just kind of stuck with it and tried to meet everybody who was in anything regarding startups. And I wouldn't say it was necessarily a great strategy for making lots of money as a headhunter, but what it did was I became the person who people would introduce in order to learn more about what was going on in startups, and so I made a ton of great friends and a lot of people who are interested in startups in Hong Kong. And I think eventually Kello was launching like their product, and they were trying to do their email campaign, right? It's really important to get emails in your funnel. And so Kello was collecting emails, and I just decided I wanted to help out because working with startups, I really wanted to be providing value to founders. And I think through, I remember coming to the Brink office once. Nick and I had met before that, but I remember he asked me and he was like, why are you helping? Why do you want to do this? And maybe he thought there was some angle, right? But, it was because I truly was like, these people are trying to start a business, they need all the help they can get. And, eventually one thing led to another, and, we started talking about EnterChina, community building. I'd also been helping out with Product Hunt. So Product Hunt is a website. It was started by a guy named Ryan Hoover I grew up with and went to high school and even college together. So as he was starting Product Hunt, I just wanted to help. I did meetups and stuff here in Hong Kong. So also, I think one of the first Product Hunt meetups I did was actually with Brink, because they said you can use the office for this purpose, and that was really great. So through this kind of network of startup entrepreneurs, Nick and I got acquainted, and eventually, we got Travis, and started trying to figure out what could be, right? I remember you and I met at the office.
Yeah. That was probably 2017.
Yeah. It was a little while ago. So we figured out how to kind of build something together, and eventually it became what's now East Accelerate. Which is it's a much more hands-on process of getting people from start to finish to launch a new e-commerce brand, right?
Yeah, because
that's the goal. Yeah.
I think a question a lot of people ask me, because a lot of the people that watch the YouTube channel and listen to podcasts are familiar with EC, they've been following EC for years. It's what is the difference between what you guys are doing now versus 4 years ago? So could you maybe just explain? You said you kind of touched on it a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah. So, like I said, I hadn't been involved since the very beginning, but in terms of the last couple of years, we understand exactly the value that we know we can add to people, right? I'm sure there are people out there right now that are thinking I really just want to have my own thing, and I've seen these cool backpacks on Indiegogo, or I've seen this watch brand launch, or maybe they've heard of these kind of crazy success stories about people launching a brand and selling it and scaling. And we realized that we could actually take the existing blueprints that were part of EnterChina from the beginning, the community aspect of people depending upon each other and working together, and actually turn that into a very powerful accelerator framework that would help people to launch their own brand, right? It's still a lot of hard work, right? Every founder who goes through, they have to dedicate the time, they have to make their goals, they actually have to do the work, but we've never had a failed crowdfunding launch up to this point, and everybody who puts the work in and just follows the process has seen success.
What do you think are some of the misconceptions that people have when it comes to launching their own products, like whether it's not realizing how much money it takes or not doing enough customer discovery, things like that? What do you find with the people that come into the program?
We get different types, but I think some people, they think it's a lot easier than it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, because you have the idea for something, there's a lot of passing the buck, I think, when people are new to this process, where they'll think like, oh, I've got this awesome idea for this Bluetooth enabled, smart machine. And that's fine, but have you ever, do you know how Bluetooth technology works? Like, are you an engineer? Are you the technical person behind that? And oftentimes the answer is no for that type of person, right? If you're trying to do something that may be way beyond, I could have an idea for self-driving cars, right? Oh, I'd love to produce this self-driving car. I could say that, but there's a disconnect, because who's going to actually be on the ground, creating the thing? And so I think that that's why we, even in the framework for choosing your product, it's like, okay, really understand how much of the value you can put into it. Because as a founder, your job is to kind of put all these pieces together and run the show. So, it's not good to put a core element of your product just in the hands of somebody else, assuming that they're going to make this award-winning product. Like, if they were the ones who knew how to market and sell that, and they also know how to make it, then what's stopping them?
Yeah, what's the point?
And we're seeing this a lot, right? Where suppliers are just putting their product direct on Amazon. You know what I mean? Because Amazon is very much commoditized.
Yeah.
There's not so much the element of branding and building your own audience. Amazon's basically like, whoever can make this thing and put it on our platform and facilitate the lowest purchase price, then those people can win. So you're seeing a lot of suppliers putting stuff on Amazon directly. And so I think that common misconceptions is just about understanding what it takes, understanding that it's going to be a lot of hard work, and being willing to stick with it. It takes, people say, how much time does it take to launch a product?
Yeah.
It's entirely dependent on how much work you actually put in, right? If you do an hour of work a week, then it could take you 10 years, right?
Yeah.
But if you're consistently putting in the work and you know what goals you're trying to hit, which is why we broke our program down into phases, right? You can kind of take as long as you want, really, like each phase, but you've got to get signed off to move through the process. And that's because if we try really hard to make people stick to a deadline, it takes up a tremendous amount of our resource. If I'm calling you once a week, hey Rico, where are you at? Are you done? And then I get back an excuse from you saying, oh, I didn't do it because I had to walk my dog, and then, I had to do this other thing. It's really hard to manage that with a small team.
Yeah.
Because we need to focus on, making sure our business is growing too, right? And it really has to be a give and take between founders taking initiative. We make sure that they're doing all the right work, and eventually that leads to a successful launch.
Yeah, you're not running the business for them. You're just giving them the framework to launch a product, but they have to do the work, right?
Well, another thing that I say is, like, obviously Brink is a very different accelerator type model. I tell people with this framework, like, there's an upfront fee, but we're not owning any of that business, right? If you do, we've had people in the past do more than $1 million in crowdfunding. So we're a fixed fee, so we just don't get any equity in those companies going forward, but at least we have a lot of goodwill. And so other founders who are, trying to get experience, we've really built a cluster of entrepreneurs who can trade wisdom and speak to each other in a way that hopefully adds value right to the community.
Are there any products or platforms you recommend people stay away from?
Can you rephrase that a little bit?
E-commerce platforms, or any specific type of products that you recommend people stay away from?
I mean, okay, it feels a little bit general. I think that a lot of people get caught up in the misconception that Amazon FBA is somehow their friend. I think fulfillment, it's a very complicated answer, but basically, Amazon is in it to win it for themselves, right?
Yeah.
Nobody else really matters, and so there's been this idea that just doing an FBA business could be a quick ticket to riches, but in a way, I think the way that the EC team sees it is that it's extremely risky. To give Amazon all of that power, you don't really get access to customers, building your own audience. You really don't own. You're not able to sell directly to a group of people that you spent time cultivating. You're basically just dependent on your ranking and showing up in the search results and being competitive on price.
Yeah.
So we kind of try to do the opposite of that. Cultivate a brand and so in terms of platform, I don't think that software is magical in a sense of we're not trying to teach people things that are not already fundamental principles of how a business should operate, right? You should still have a core product. You should still be finding the right type of people to sell to. Those things shouldn't change. And then, managing your price, things like that. You have to get those things right? But in terms of platform, there's really no magic bullet.
Yeah.
And I think that is also, you see it, right? You'll see it in little ways. I just put this thing on Kickstarter and people are supposed to give me money, and they don't understand the months and months and months of hard work that go into that, period of time that could be a month, could be 10 days where you're actually having the campaign live, or you're actually trying to get people to fund it, right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of steps involved in getting to that. So, I don't know, there's no magic bullet.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was thinking about the Amazon side of things. Obviously a lot of people, including my clients, want to jump on Amazon. We get people, launching their first products all the time. But at the same time, from a financial standpoint, I think sometimes for them it makes sense to start on Amazon and then launch their own products.
Yeah, I mean, when we are interviewing founders who apply for a program, we definitely look for things like previous experience. I heard a horror story the other day about how, just a combination of how things can go wrong when trying to build an FBA business. So we do look at that in terms of previous experience. If you're willing to get into the technical parts, right? It shows initiative. You can do something. You can learn new things on the fly. You can adapt. Those are all really good things. But there's nothing special about the platform itself. You have to really strategically understand how to build yourself into a protected space so that you can start running a scalable business.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And I think it's also you're scalable and defensible. It's a long-term play, when you're building a brand, right? Versus a lot of people with Amazon think it's kind of it was a gold rush for a bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's definitely not going to last forever.
Yeah, I think any kind of get rich quick kind of mindset, you usually see people, it's like this kind of, you see when the dream crumbles, right? When they think, oh, I'm going to, front load and spend all this money on something and it's supposed to work right now. I think if anything, people should, just manage your expectation. You can do such powerful things by just doing one little thing every day for a year, right? Rather than trying to cram it all into, 3 months where you're really fired up and then you just lose all your momentum. I think it's good to try and position yourself for the long haul. It makes a huge difference.
From just a more practical standpoint, do you recommend the people that go through the program, do you recommend them coming to China for an extended period of time, or is that not necessary?
I mean, Not really. I think things have dramatically changed, right? From when you guys were doing Canton Fair stuff. Like, I know you made a ton of contacts and relationships of people that were like, okay, wow, like I'm in China, it's this big fair, you know, everyone, different suppliers. And there's definitely something to be said about it, but I don't think anyone needs to come to China, especially now, right? Things are shifting in the supply chain. I think, you know, obviously it's good to find a good partner. Like, you know, we recommend talking to you, and I'm sure you've got a huge network of contacts like that can figure out how to get the thing people are trying to get done.
Yeah,
right?
full disclosure, like I'm part of the program. Like there's a sourcing section. I think it's an additional sort of like bonus content type thing.
Yeah.
So just so people know.
No, and it's good because ultimately we have to rely on a network of people we trust, you know, and I think that in China, you know, it takes time to build trust with everybody, right? It's a huge part of just being here, and so, you know, there are lots of ways to source a product, right? And you can do it in China's not the only country that can produce things, but it has a really, really big supply chain and a very competent one too.
That's good. Yeah, no, I think I agree. If you can get good strategic partners, I think if you're trying to save money, sometimes it makes sense. Like if you don't want to have to work with a consultant or something like that, coming to China for an extended period definitely cuts down on some things. So a good example is like Maurice is going through the program right now, and like having him come to the factory to sign off on like samples and things like that cuts a week and a half of feedback, because with other clients we'd have to ship the samples to them in the States or Europe or whatever, and then, you know, they would go through it, send us the feedback, and then we pass it on to the factory. Whereas if, you know, we tell Maurice like, hey, sample's ready in a couple of days, he flies in, we go to the factory or at the factory together, real-time feedback, factory implements changes, sometimes even within that day. So that's one major benefit, I would say.
I would say though, at the risk of, you know, it's a very different study, because he had done such a good job in getting, you know, building a funnel, doing customer discovery work, really guaranteeing and understanding who he's selling to for the long term.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not until he actually, you know, he had a successful crowdfunding campaign, has been very diligent about every step of the process, and this is just one more way to, you know, kind of make sure that everything gets done quickly and that he can sign off on it. Because when people are asking about coming to China, it's usually when they are, you know, they learn about, I don't know, you have people talking about drop shipping or certain things, and they just want like a quick and easy product that they think it's gonna be like, oh, I'm just gonna find this, I'm gonna pick this, and I'm gonna start selling, and I'm gonna make a lot of money. So people who have never been to China, no previous experience, no real reason why they need to come, I don't want to encourage people to just say, oh, I'm going to get on a plane to China to figure out how to get rich selling some product. But in the case of Maurice, where he really went through a diligent process and is now, you know, just signing off on things that need to get done, it's a very different mindset. You know, there are reasons that you should come, but I would say most cases you don't need to come.
Okay. Obviously, we have some time constraints, so I don't want to. There's more questions that I have, but how does one join the program? Say wants to join the program.
I mean, by far the most effective way is to go to www.enterchina.co and sign up for the email course. Right? Read the emails, go through the case study, get to know us. And, you know, and eventually there will be a prompt to get on you can sign up for the application for EC Accelerate, right? Sign up with your name, give some detailed info, and then someone will reach out if they, you know, they'll read the application and then try to schedule a call. So, you know, it's very important that whoever's applying for the program understands us and what we offer and what we do. And then we evaluate accordingly to make sure that they're the right fit for the program.
Where do you see the program going, I guess, in the next, I usually ask 3 to 5 years, but we could go with like 1 to 3 years.
I mean, I think that we're getting a lot more really talented technical freelancers. Like I see a more streamlined way. People, when they're signing on there, where do I get a landing page done, or how do I get a 3D rendering or a CAD file? Stuff that takes a lot of specialty, right? I could imagine that there will be more freelancers involved throughout the process, so people have options. You know what I mean? For example, like if you're trying to make something, you've probably experienced this, where you're trying to make clothing or cloth or something, it can be easier to render a bag than it is to do like a garment. You know what I mean? And so we need different people with different specialties to be able to do that, so it can still be an effective, that people can still go through the program effectively.
What do you think is the smallest thing you guys have done with the program that's brought the largest results?
Say it again, the what?
Smallest thing you guys have done with the program that's brought the largest results.
Oh, you mean like 80-20, like the biggest?
Yeah.
I need to think about it. I think just having a way to manage the process. Like I've talked to you endlessly about how Airtable works, but using Airtable is basically like combination of a cloud spreadsheet that actually operates as a database, and so that's allowed us to keep really neat and tidy records. I know that when we switched over, from sort of the old program to the way we operate now, the records, as things tend to do, right? They can get really messy, but this has allowed us to be really organized and efficient to understand exactly where people are at any point during the program, which allows us to give them the flexibility to do their work. So, it's the organization, I think, has been really important, but then also just the way we operate in terms of our sales. We've just got a very efficient process of getting people in and evaluating them and making sure they're right fit for the program.
Nice. And what 3 books, podcasts, or say blogs would you recommend people listen or read?
So I actually like, my favorite podcast is Radiolab, and they just do a really good job telling stories. There's one about architecture called 99% Invisible. And then it's Roman Mars, I think, is the host.
It's the same WNYC.
I
studio,
think
right?
I don't think they're the same. I think they might be affiliated, but one is based in the Bay Area, like out of Oakland. The other one's in New York. And then I listen to Joe Rogan podcasts a lot more now. I don't know. Some of the conversations are really interesting to me, but and then in terms of book, I've actually been rereading The 4-Hour Workweek and kind of just reflecting on how powerful. I like Tim Ferriss,
yeah,
and I think a lot of people who are doing this kind of stuff, obviously.
Like if you were to I've asked this question to so many people, and that's 9 times out of 10, that is one of the answers, is the 4-Hour Workweek. Like, it's crazy the amount of people, the amount of overlap there is with that book.
Okay, I do have another one, just so completely different than the Tim Ferriss one. If you're interested in learning about what it might be like inside North Korea, there's a book called Nothing to Envy by Barbara Demick. She used to be the bureau chief, I think, of the LA Times in Beijing, and she wrote this just phenomenal book about North Korea. And so yeah, that's a very, very different type of read. But obviously, I live in Asia, so I'm very curious about stuff like that. And obviously geopolitics, there's a lot going on at any given time.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. So thanks for being on the show. If people want to reach out to you, where can they find you?
So I guess you could just send me an email directly. My email is nick.zieber, Zieber, at enterchina.co. And
we'll link it up in the show notes as well. If you want to reach out to us, that's podcast@sourcefinasia.com. If you want to check out the show notes at sourcefinasia.com/madeinchina. Of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, the links will be in the description below. And I will see you guys next week. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe.